This is the third time I have done this with these two esteemed gentlemen. The first time was in Asheville in 2017 when I was the chair of the chamber, and it was right after the Keith Lamont Scott
Yeah.
shooting. And so that was a very powerful time here in Charlotte. The second time was at your museum, that the Harvey Gantt celebration. I got to talk to both of you, and then here today. And it's one of the greatest privileges that I've had if I look back on the things I've gotten to do. So I think it's important that we start with taking a look back and talking to everyone here about how you got here. Why did you come here? And what did you think was going to happen when you did? So, Harvey, let's start with you and then we'll hear from Hugh.
Well, I thought you were going to start with Hugh because he's older than I am,
I,
and he got here first.
Yeah, I did.
You really want me to start?
I do.
Okay. I came to Charlotte in 1965. I was both famous and notorious. Famous because I was the first student of color to go to school in South Carolina at any institution from elementary to higher education. Came from Charleston. Always envisioned staying in South Carolina, not North Carolina. But no one in South Carolina in an architectural firm would hire me. They wanted to, some of them did. But as I said, I was notorious. I had broken a big tradition in the state, and no firm wanted to be associated with having given this young man a job. But there was a brave firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I call them brave now because they didn't have to do it, but they invited me for an interview and then hired me. And that's how I got to know that there was a Charlotte, North Carolina. Because I came from Charleston, and Charleston was a lot more famous and well known than Charlotte. But I came here and worked with Gooley Odell. Most of you in this room are too young to know who he was, but he was a towering figure in the area of architecture and had done some of the more iconic structures in and around this region. And the first day we met, he said, I hired you, and I need to tell you that there are reasons that I did so. One, we are getting lots of federal contracts, and we needed to have more diversity in our firm. They had about 104 architects, and I was going to give them the diversity they needed.
Yeah.
And I said, fair enough. I want to learn the business, and I want to have the opportunity to practice here. And I'm honored that you hired me. So we had a mutual situation that worked for both of us. And he kept his word. He taught me the business. He literally taught me the business. And he introduced me to many, many people who were movers and shakers in this community. And he allowed me the opportunity to work on the 1968 Charlotte Master Plan, which really defines the city that you know today as Charlotte's downtown. There's not a single element of that plan that has not already been put in place. And I got to work on a team with other architects, and he took me to all the meetings to meet all the CEOs of all the big firms. And I watched him use design and quality of life of the city to convince maybe sometimes recalcitrant leaders to take the jump of trying to move the city ahead. So that's how I got here. But I always tell this story, and I'll tell this quickly. When Cindy and I left Clemson to come to Charlotte, packed up everything we had in a small Ford Falcon. I'll never forget the car. It wasn't very big, and we didn't have very much. And we drove with our daughter Sonia, uh, to Wilkinson Boulevard, and I said, "We'll get a room for the night. We'll get a room for the night." And drove down Wilkinson Boulevard, where all these, you probably won't even remember these things, but these one-story drive-in motel type spaces. I went through about 4 or 5 of them, and they all refused. They said they didn't have any vacancies. And I was very discouraged. That's my first encounter really with the city, other than the job interview I had a month or so earlier. We got out we ran through all of Wilkinson, couldn't get a room, and drove out to I-85 at Statesville Avenue. I will never forget this as long as I live. And there was a Howard Johnson, and Howard Johnson at that time had motels associated with their well-known restaurant establishment. And I was at my wit's end. It was getting pretty late, and my first day at work was the next morning. And so I said, this has got to work. Remember that the 1964 Civil Rights Act on public accommodations had passed in 1964. And yet here it was mid-year 1965, and the practice was still going on de facto. So I said, the way to do this is to take Cindy with me and Sonia, them walking in. And I took them in, and I wanted them to look as pitiful as possible and as tired as they could. Got in, there was this manager behind the desk, and I could tell that my plan had worked because he looked like he had a heart. I asked if he had a room for the night. Took a long time, went in the back room, came back out and said, yes, we do have a room. Hooray. I got to sleep the night before my first day on the job. I say that because this is a remarkable city, one where my introduction to it was not very pleasant because of that bugaboo of race, but one in which, 10 to 15 years later, I was mayor of the city.
Yeah.
So there is something to be said about the spirit in this community, and I needed to tell that story.
So glad you did. It still just makes me want to cry, but it, that wasn't that long ago, and I do think we've made progress, but we still have a long way to go. Hugh, how'd you get here? And give us your story.
Well, I'll try to be quick.
You trying to say I was too long-winded?
No. And I didn't have the same hurdles you did. I had different ones. I'd grown up believing that I would end up running the family businesses. We were in the cotton business, and we owned banks and farms. And I just had made the assumption, because of the right of primogeniture, that I would end up being in charge of the family affairs. And when I went to Carolina, I didn't do very well. I had a 2.0 average and got out. And then went to Marine Corps. And I was about 2 weeks before I was getting out of the Marine Corps, I was home, and my father said to me, son, what are you going to do when you get out of the Marine Corps? And I said, well, Dad, I thought I'd come home and help you. And he said, we're getting along fine without you. Said, you better go up there to Charlotte to the American Trust Company and get yourself a job. So I got sent to Charlotte and applied for a job, and I got an answer that said, don't call us, we'll call you, meaning they didn't want me. And I went home and told my father that they weren't interested in me, and he called the chairman, apparently, and said, I understand you're not interested in my son. And he said, of course we are. And because we owned several banks, and who banked with the bank up here. And so that's how I got my job. I went on, but I'd won a lot of money in a poker game when we went in 11, and then 58, I was on an aircraft carrier. And so I decided not to come to work. I'd go to Europe. And I went to this other Marine, and I decided we'd just follow some girls from Converse and University of South Carolina And so I ended up meeting this girl and fell in love with her and decided I'd want to marry her. And so I came home. This is a girl I met. I met her on June the 3rd, married on October the 3rd. So when I came to work in Charlotte on September the 1st, I was already headed to getting married. Didn't know anybody, and they weren't really glad to see me. They were, so I had to go to work pretty hard. But I told my wife, don't put down any roots. We're not going to stay. But apparently I was wrong.
Well, no, and what it remind me, what did you make? Because I remember you.
Well, my starting salary really was $12.50 a day, and it's hard for people to focus on what that is. That's actually $375 a month. But I was making $12.50 a day. I remember it took me 8 days to make $100, and we lived in Selwyn Village, and that was $78.50 a month for rent till Jane got pregnant. We got a 2-bedroom apartment. Then it cost $82.50, and that's what money was worth in those days. And
Mhm.
you could buy a lot, and we lived fine on that. The taxes were pretty low, but maybe 13%, maybe. You and I had a conversation about taxes one time, if you remember. Anyway, that's how I got here, and that's where I started, and that's kind of where I finished.
Well, I dare say you're not even
come
finished.
on.
So let's talk about how you two met, because this plan that Harvey mentioned about the city that he began working on is something I believe the two of you started implementing at some point together.
He may have a better memory than me about when we met. Where I remember us really first getting into discussions or arguments or whatever you want to call it was we were down at that hotel that's in Second Ward, whatever the ward is that we never have developed. I think it's Second Ward. Uh, and one night at a political thing, I think, and we got to talking about various things. And I think that's where I kind of remember meeting him. And I think that was 1969, but I don't remember exactly. It was when Ben Tyson was running for office.
That was a little later than that.
I'm
71.
okay. So is that when we met? Or do you think we met before?
I think we met around 71,
Yeah.
72.
Yeah.
That's how old we're getting, guys. So.
Yeah. We don't. What?
I mean, that's only 52 years ago.
One's not going to remember that you're meeting. I mean, back then he was not the iconic figure he is today.
Really?
I. So we don't have really precise dates that we met. I don't think he was in any of those rooms where I was when that 68 master plan was being pushed by Gooley Odell. People by the name of Stores and
Reese.
all these,
Allison Reese.
Allison Reese. But I remember him, he doesn't even remember this. When I, along with Jeff Huberman, started our architectural firm in 71, there was a fellow by the name of Phil Berry. And we have a school in the city named after Phil. He was the first African-American member of the school board.
Yeah.
But Phil worked for North Carolina National Bank.
Yeah.
And I needed capital to start the firm. And for some reason, I had the audacity to believe that I could just walk in and say, I need a loan and I'll pay y'all back as my business gets better. And that turned out not to be the case, Allie. I'd go places and they'd be turning me down. And Phil Berry told me when I went to see him to write a letter telling me about the ambition you had for Gantt Huberman Architects. My partner was Jeffrey Huberman. And I wrote this long letter. And I'm going to tell you, AI couldn't have done it better than I did. I wrote this letter and I took it to Mr. Berry. And somehow giving a nice sad face always seems to work. I guess it conveys sincerity. Uh, but at any rate, he said, I'm going to see if I can get you this money. And there were three guys I remembered at the bank that were vying to succeed the existing CEO. One of them's name was, I don't know, it was Luther Hodges. There's another fellow and a guy named Hugh McColl. Uh, and he said that he was going to take this up to the top because he thought that I should get this loan. Somebody saw good in me. I'm swearing that he said this fellow McCall approved giving me this big loan.
How much was the
Start my
loan?
business. You don't really want me to tell you how big it was.
Oh, 52 years ago.
$7,500. That was a lot of money.
Yeah. No.
A lot of money. But they believed enough in me, and we got to meet at some events afterwards as you continued to rise like a meteor at the top of the company. But our real coming together was much later when he was the only major businessman in this community that stepped out and said, I'm endorsing Harvey Gantt for mayor. And that sent a sort of meteoric blast through the business community. And the developers hated me, but I think he did a lot to make that, make me a little bit more palatable to the community.
That was 83 when you became mayor and I became chairman of the CEO of the bank. Same year, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I figured out that you were going to end up being chairman.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about you were mayor, you became chairman, and how did you all then begin to work together? Because much of what has happened in this city, we can see your fingerprints all over it. So how did that evolve?
Well, I can just speak for myself. I was trying to build a big company and I wanted to hire people from all over the world that had talent. And this was a boring place and I wanted to do something about it. And we had a plan. And everybody, every visiting fireman that's come here for the last 25 or 30 years wanted to ask what we did here. And I've always said we had a plan, and it was the Odell plan. And we set about implementing it. And we had a great city manager. We had two great city managers during that period at least. And I've always said that we've had the greatest form of government there is because we got one person to blame if everything doesn't go well. I'm looking at the city manager right now. But it really worked. And we agreed on what we wanted the city to look like. We had a plan. And so we implemented it. And people think it was magic, but we just followed the plan. And I remember when we first built our first tower in 1974. Well, that was our second tower. We built the first one in 69, 64. In 74, we built the glass tower, and we're thinking about putting a sign on top of it. And Julio Dell's famous for saying that would be like putting a sign on Raquel Welch saying "girl," and so we didn't do that. Apparently, somebody recently missed that message, but anyhow, I don't know. Anyhow, we set out to do it, and we didn't cut any corners. We followed the plan very aggressively.
Well, there were some things I recall presenting that 68 plan to folks, and the notion of how to enliven the downtown really revolved from some of us young planners saying that people have to live down here.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and this was a time when John Belk and his associates and others were leaving to go out to some farmland southeast of the city to a place called South Park that we know about today. And this was a pattern happening all across the country. We were abandoning cities to move on to highways built with major federal money that every city had, and leaving the city sort of bereft at the middle with just offices and jobs. And what's that expression you always had that you could take a basketball and roll it down the middle of Tryon Street after 5 o'clock and it wouldn't hit anything, cars nor people.
I always said, well, you could fire a shotgun down the street.
Well, that's
It wouldn't hit
a
anybody.
little bit more violent.
Yeah.
But at any rate, the notion that we would have people living downtown was one that we literally had to sell. And not only that, not living in the bungalow houses that Charlotte had gotten used to, but actually putting them in towers,
Yeah.
you know, and putting other big ticket spaces, what I call big ticket spaces, the symphony and a concert hall, a stadium, an arena. All of those were embodied as ideas in the master plan because they were, the notion was if it's at the center of the city, then everybody equidistant from it.
Yeah.
And they could get there and that would enliven the space. And we would, with people downtown, there'd be a renaissance of retail and so forth. That's what we were trying to sell. And lo and behold, a city council adopted it as a master plan.
Yeah.
And for every 10 years, it gets upgraded now from an organization that Hugh started or pushed for, the City Uptown Development Corporation that became Charlotte Center City.
Yeah.
And we update that plan every year, and we then try to convince the city council to adopt the changes that are made in it. But it was way back then that some people had the courage to make that decision about what the center city would be. The other thing that I like to think about is that Charlotte's always been sort of chasing Atlanta. It's been it's to a lesser extent now, but it still kind of tries to do that. And I read it in some of the stuff that I observe here in this community. And so we were trying to figure out how are we going to get past Atlanta, or how are we going to define ourselves as a city? I mean, what's going to make us special? What's going to do it? John Belk had an idea that said, let's build the biggest airport we can. And he convinced a number of us, I was on the city council then, that a new 10,000-foot runway would make a big difference. And there were lots of people who railed against it because of the cost. And of course, it would have to be underwritten by citizens. But we built that runway, and we said if we built it, we would run past Raleigh, our competitor, Greensboro, Nashville, Memphis, all these places. If we could just get this thing going. And then we put that together with Piedmont Airlines, okay, which was a little puddle hopper out of Winston-Salem, and let Charlotte be the hub and let everybody come to that location to go anywhere else they wanted to. And that sold. That really sold. But then what really made a lot of the plan come to life was, in fact, this plan for Fourth Ward, Third Ward, whatever. And this is the guy that gave his associates the green light to say, yeah, we like that too. So we started the generation of the plan, really, in my opinion, with residential, and then all the other kinds of things started to build on it.
When did you move downtown? What year?
Early. Fourth Ward, some of you will remember, you will certainly remember, was the home of the captains of business and industry for the 19th century and early 20th century. And then they abandoned it in the suburbanization that occurred that went to Myers Park and then further and further out. And so what was left behind were boarding houses, big old houses that empty lots, vagrants, what you would expect would happen in a city where you don't pay attention to it. And we literally didn't. In the soft underbelly of the downtown, we had these wards around us. There were 3 of those wards that still survive today, but the fourth one had a traumatic thing that happened to it that all of us know about. It's called urban renewal. And we moved a whole community to the northwest end and western end of town.
1962, I think.
It started in 64.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a stain on the council, on the city in a lot of ways, and it caused a lot of unrest in the community. So we needed to really do something to start revitalizing and bringing the city back. We saved a little bit of First Ward. We used HUD money that you guys supported very strongly to build housing back in First Ward. And Fourth Ward then was the product of the Junior League and Nations Bank, Bank of America, and some daring people. I moved downtown right at the beginning of that. Always tell the story of my mother telling her where I was going to live. Where is my son, the architect, going to live if he's not going to stay in suburbia? And I drove her over one day to show her the lot that I was going to build a house on. And the lot had junked washing machines and refrigerators. And she wanted to know, had I lost my mind? I said, well, but the city is planning some great things for this neighborhood. So I moved in Fourth Ward in 1981.
Well, I built Fourth Ward. So, no, I did.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not joking. What happened was that interest rates were at 13% housing. And I loaned money through the city, tax-free, and we were lending 6% money in a 13% world. And people flocked to Fourth Ward and built houses, and we built a lot of them. Our Community Development Corporation built them, and we did a lot of that, and that worked. And I thought I'd get all those customers. And funny thing was, we only got about a third of them. So apparently,
you got more than that.
Even giving people money at 6 in the 13% world wouldn't get you business. But anyway, and then we, as you know, did the same thing. Really partnered with the city and the community development community group in Third Ward. And I remember what we did is the bank. We bought we put up the $8.5 million to buy out the junkyard where we have now the practice field and Johnson. What is it? Wales.
Johnson and Wales.
Johnson and Wales.
Yeah. So we once we moved that junkyard out of the way, which was covering about 10 acres, more than that, we were able to develop Third Ward. So, and First Ward really came last of all the redeals. But I'll have to admit, we did put a lot of money into it, somewhere around $1 billion, maybe something
Easily,
maybe 2 or 3. I can't remember.
So, well, and look at it today. You know, you also built a child care center down there and for Bank of America. And my sister-in-law shares a driveway with Harvey and has for, I don't know, 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And it's a whole new place. Jim Palermo lived down there. There's a lot of Bank of America influence down there.
he kind of ordered his chief lieutenants to move there. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
I would never do anything like that.
Yep. So when we're going to open it up for questions too, so get ready out in the audience. But you both mentioned, a little bit about civic and, being able to roll a ball down the middle of the road and nobody out and no retail, and how did you all sort of corral people around doing things like a symphony or a stadium or things like that do make people want to live here? Hugh, let's start with you.
Well, I want to say one thing that as some early in my career or halfway in there, maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 years in, I ran our international division, and I went to all the big cities of the world, and I saw people living above their shops, and so that really got me interested in having downtown housing. That is, New York did, Paris did, London did, San Francisco did actually, and so that was why I got interested in downtown living. But if to be very candid, we had I don't even we used to have to drive out on towards Monroe to go to the symphony. There's a hall out there. I've lost the name of it, but anyway, when we built our tower, when we began to build our major tower we have now at the bank, we also built the Performing Arts Center. We put up 48 million. It cost 48 million, and I think we put up 25 million of it, more or less. And when we brought the football team here, we financed the stadium, and we did explain to people if they built the stadium downtown, we'd put up $100 million, but if they built it somewhere else, we'd put up nothing. So, we did coerce people into doing things.
Mildly.
Regulators weren't like they are today back then.
No. And Harvey and I tried to get the arena built in the center city, and that was one thing we failed on together. And they built it out near the airport somewhere. I didn't like it because apparently they tore it down. But anyway,
How many of you know where the first big arena after the one on Independence was built? How many of you remember where it is? Off of Tyvola Road?
Yeah.
Remember that?
yeah.
Well, one of my first acts as mayor was to argue with my good friend Eddie Knox and Johnny Harris about the fact that the arena belonged to where the Arnold Palmer Cadillac
Yeah.
facility
Never
was.
wanted to put in.
And that would fit the master plan that I've been talking about this whole session. And tried to make the argument for that. And I lost that argument. One of the first big things I did, and the council did not, we had two sites to consider, one downtown and one in suburbia. Admittedly, a developing area for suburbia. And I took the cynical view that the developers wanted out there because they could build more subdivisions and
Which,
all that stuff. And maybe that was the wrong approach, but they got mad at me. But this guy was backing the idea that that's how you build the center city. Well, we built the Coliseum on Tyvola Road. And I must say I had very memorable moments out there. The first Hornet game,
yeah, we
is
did.
memory and history, and there are lots of good things. But I immediately saw, and planners would immediately see this too, because we've discovered it all across America. When you build those things out along an interstate highway, it is the worst thing you possibly can do. Because after every Hornet game, it took us an hour and a half to get out of that place.
Yeah.
We were all trying to jam up the same highway to get out. Well, there's some interesting things I won't go into that happen. But at the end of the day, I always tease Johnny Harris about this. The Coliseum, the Spectrum Center that we know today is downtown. And one has to say it's far more successful than the arena was out in the suburbs. So that planning principle of build at the center, when people disperse, they disperse everywhere, not on one or two roads, but on many roads. And we see that with the stadium downtown now. I usually walk and just marvel at the fact that 73,000 people can be there, and in less than an hour and a half, they've dispersed because they're going out on lots of different alternative routes to get from the downtown. We learned some things from that. I want to say one more thing about McColl, which is kind of, I didn't realize we were as much as partners as we really ultimately came to be. There was a fight about that the Blumenthal
Yeah.
facility. There was another developer further down where Transamerica Square is today that wanted to build on property he owned, an arena. And he had a good idea. I liked the idea because it was downtown. It was not out on Independence heading to Monroe for the symphony and all the other things there. And this developer was fighting, and city council was going back and forth about what we need to do. And so it stayed on the back burner for about a year and a half. And I'm out in Denver at a meeting, League of Cities meeting, and I get this call from chairman of Nations Bank, and he says to me, "We've got this all settled. We're going to build that symphony hall right downtown in the heart of the city." And I said, "What?" "Yep." He said, "We purchased all this land." And certain people benefited from the purchase, but we're going to build that concert hall that you and the city have always wanted. It's going to be right at the heart of the city. It's the master plan. He says, "Now, can we just get some approvals that we're going to go ahead with this?" And I said, "Wait a minute, Hugh. We can't make a decision like that just on a phone call. I can't tell you that. We have to take this through the process of review." He never quite understood that. He almost wanted to say, "Are you looking a gift horse in the mouth? I'm getting ready to pay for the whole damn thing." Almost all of it.
Yeah.
And but that was a seminal moment for the arts in this town, and ultimately allowed us to build that facility. And then a committee of 100 civic-minded charlatans got together to develop the plan that became the Levine Center for the Arts, but it wouldn't have started unless we had done this thing at the heart.
Yeah. Well, I remember. I ended up getting 15 million from the state, or the 18 million, but I had to give $1 million to somebody running for governor in order to get them to vote for it.
So I don't know. I don't know about those.
Those are the.
I don't know about those kinds of
No,
things.
those are
The
things.
statute of limitations has run. We're fine. We're fine. I'm going to come to the audience next. So, Ashley, if we can get ready with the microphone. But when you all look now today, Hugh, and you look at the city, Harvey, you had the Odell plan from 1965. It's 1968. What are there gaps? Do you see things missing? Are there things you still want to do? And what is that?
I can't say what I want to do because I'm out of the arena. These folks over here who are on city council and current leaders will do that. I still think we continue to need more retail, and that has not yet taken hold, in my opinion. That's about, I think the rest of it is organic. It grows on its own. I mean, who thought South End would look like it is today? It didn't. That's not even in the 68 master plan. And that happened as a result of the thriving downtown. You?
Well, I think the thing we need is for people to come back to work. That might be one thing that would help the downtown a great deal and help retail. We can't have retail if we don't have customers. And now I will say this, and I think we should be proud of our city because it's the only city in America, and I can say this safely, in which you can walk to the opera, the ballet, to the symphony, and to pro football and pro basketball and pro baseball. It's the only city in the world that you can walk to them. Like if you want to go see the Giants, you got to go to New Jersey. And I mean, you just go look at think of all the big cities and where their facilities are. So we have a unique city, and it's a result of great planning and then great execution. And a lot of people to be thanked for it. And we've been very fortunate. I do see us building more and more housing in the center city. I think that'll continue, and which means that the streets will be torn up, putting in new water systems, et cetera, for the next 40 years. But anyway, we're going to keep working on it.
I wish that, just to add to that, I really wished that the transportation system keeps up with the growth.
That's the challenge.
And I guess if I'm annoyed, and the mayor knows this, if I'm annoyed with anything, it is that only the lawmakers in this city and the business leaders and the community can really decide on the nature of that planned transportation system. I'm a little annoyed, and I hope, well, I'll say it anyway. I just hope that the 1 cent sales tax will, at some point, the state will allow charlatans to decide how those funds, or the people in Mecklenburg County to decide how those funds ought to be used. An equal distribution for roads and transit is not good, in my opinion, because we don't really have a lot of places to put the roads and to widen them, and
Yeah.
they don't help with the situation with environmental quality.
All right. So let's go to the audience. Sure. Thanks, Avery.
I'll do it in stereo if you need me to. Thank you, and thank you. My name is DC Lucchese from Well Run Media and the Charlotte Marathon. When you were plotting and planning and mayoring and chairmaning, did you ever imagine there would be 117 people moving here every day?
I wouldn't have been able to put it in those terms, and other people smarter than me would have. What I wanted was quality growth. I used Atlanta. I shouldn't do that.
Go ahead.
We wanted quality growth, not 15 lanes of traffic circling the city. I always remember coming from New York and Boston, coming back to North Carolina after graduate school, and one of my friends from up there kept saying, Harvey, it is so wonderful to be able to go from point A to point B without having to figure out how you're going to navigate for the next hour or so. And I thought that was a very, very, very insightful comment. What would make a city great is if we could move about with much more ease than some of the older, mature industrial cities of the North. We still have the chance to do that, despite how bad you think traffic is. We still have the chance to make movement in the city a dream. And no, I didn't imagine 116 people coming every day. But if they did, I wanted to make sure that we could accommodate them. And I think that's what the city leaders ought to always be looking at.
Yep.
I've told you both, I'm so excited you're here and I get to hear you. I'm Elaine Loyak with Delta Dental of North Carolina. And I'm wondering, can you tell us how you brought people along with you in all that you did, and especially when there was disagreement?
When it was what?
Disagreement.
Oh, yeah, right.
Go
Well,
ahead, Hugh.
there were a few of us that were interested in the city, and John Belt was one of them, and Ed Crutchfield, who ran First Union National Bank, and Rolf Neal, who ran the Charlotte Observer, and Bill Lee, who ran Duke. And the five of us were really focused on the center city and nothing else, truthfully, and the airport, I should say. And we would get together when one of us had an idea that we thought was a good idea, that the city ought to be doing that, or we should do it for the city. We'd get together, always at Bill Lee's place, generally, because Ed Crutchfield and I were competitors, and we wanted to meet on neutral ground. And so we would go to Bill's office, and we would talk about it, and we'd agree on what we were going to do, and then we would do it. And if anybody disagreed with it, it was just tough. I mean, it didn't matter if they disagreed, just to be honest. I don't know any other way to say it. I could probably think of something nicer to say, but I can't really. We just did what had to be done, and we'd push whatever buttons had to be pushed. But basically, we were putting up most of the money between First Union and ourselves. We were put and do we were, the three of us were putting up most of the money for everything, so wasn't much to argue about.
Well, not all of the money.
He doesn't agree with
They-
that.
we didn't always agree on that.
No, we didn't.
But they always had their meeting, and I'm really appreciative of this guy and some other business leaders because it does help. It really does help when you have business leaders who are engaged in trying to build a quality community. The job would have been much tougher on government if we had business leaders who were looking backward or who didn't want to move, or who were only interested in their organizations or their businesses. But there was a tougher job for those who were dealing with the public sector, and that's where I was during those years of change. It was great to have Hugh behind us, but one had to make the average citizen understand how that benefited the whole community. And we tried to do that, not just through the standard public hearings, but they underwrote the cost, for example, for us to educate the community. But they didn't really tell us how to educate the community.
No, of course not.
If there was a bond campaign, and I used to tell this story all across America, and I can't even remember all the figures now, but Charlotte passed bond issue after bond issue after bond issue that dealt with the growth of this city, and I can count on less than one hand the number that failed.
Yeah.
And that's because there was a real effort to go out and get citizens to see that it was in their best interest to see the city grow and to distribute the resources of the city in a much more equitable manner than we had done in the past. So in the period between 71 and 90, and maybe beyond, because I didn't pay much attention after that, but we did well, and lots of things happened.
So Carol Gray dropped off a lot of documents from his house to us at the Alliance, and going all the way back to the Odell plan to 1965, the bond campaign, and the role that the chamber played in that. And it was, I mean, I haven't read through everything yet, but it's pretty incredible that we've got all this history that you're talking about here. We've got another question. Yeah.
Thank you. Janet Godfrey with University City Partners. We are a week out from the election. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Gantt, about a different election when you ran against Jesse Helms and what impact that had on your life and Charlotte, the Charlotte region.
I promised these guys that I wouldn't talk about this election because I'm still coming out of a funk, but I won't deal with that. I guess you figured from coming out of a funk who I supported, but the Helms election, to me, I felt almost like I felt Tuesday night for my candidate. I thought North Carolina had missed an opportunity, not to just simply say vote for me, but to bring the community together across racial lines. And we had a vigorous campaign, if you'll recall, and we lost something like 48 to 52 with Helms. The campaign brought out a lot of good things, I think appealed to the very best notions of people in the state, and I credit the closeness of that race that said there were a lot of folks, white and black, who thought that the vision we were trying to present for North Carolina and the nation was the one that we would go forward with. And I've had opportunities, many opportunities now to look back on that race, and I see changes in North Carolina, believe it or not. I watched the other day, even as my favorite candidate lost in the state, extremism did not win out, and we've elected some pretty good people, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, et cetera. In my opinion, I apologize to the Republicans in the room who voted the other way, but I thought that was a reflection of the changes we know that are occurring in this state. I believed that when I lost to Helms, that there would never be another senator going from North Carolina with Helms's views, Republican or Democrat. I thought he was the past. I was more the future. That has turned out to be true, Republican or Democrat. We've never seen another Helms type person. But every now and then in this country, we do find out who we are in some very sobering ways. So I'm troubled by what has recently happened, and my goal right now is to continue to work hard, even in my senior years, to see us move forward toward a better vision that brings us all together. Because it certainly happened. I didn't curl up in a tent somewhere and disappear. I have enjoyed my continued involvement in the community.
I got to say one thing. I was back in Harvey, of course, and I was attacked fiercely, and both after the election and during the election. And one of my large stockholders, in an act of anger, sold this tremendous number of shares and made a big deal out of it. And I always felt good about it because afterwards it cost him roughly $50 million to have it. Still don't like him, but anyway, that was a little bit of our past. I want to go back and say one thing though. One, when you were mayor, was after you were mayor. We were. If you remember, there was a great debate about getting the buses off the square, and this was had racial overtones to it. That the north side of town would never get developed while we had that there, and this debate went on and on and on, and finally one day I said to the mayor, "I'll tell you what, you just deed the piece of property, the fish and oyster lot to us, and I'll build you a damn transportation center," which we did and gave to the city. And we did it in record time, if you remember. And I remember who the architect was, you.
It was me.
Because I hired you.
Well, I think it served a good purpose for a number of years, and now the city is going to take it to another level.
Yeah.
Okay, do you all have time for one or two more questions?
I've been there half my life now, so I'll be glad to stay.
Okay, great. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, sorry, him, and then, okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Brannigan. I moved here in 1994, and I still have my first pair of Nations Bank gloves from the first Panthers game I ever went to. But anyhow, my first intercity visit with the former Charlotte Chamber was to Seattle, and Mr. McColl, you were on that trip. And when we all went, it was a very different culture. We're a very banking, suit and tie town at the time, still to some degree are today. And I remember when we got back, I don't know if it was a debrief, but you got up and spoke and talked very adamantly about we need to look past the Mohawk and think about the brain power that is underneath in our community. And I don't know if you remember ever saying that, but I tell that story all the time. And I just would love you to comment on some of those sentiments. Those are the types of things that I think were your beliefs helping build this whole city. And for those of you who weren't here, I'd love for you to inspire them with some of those thoughts.
Well, you're nice to say that. The truth of the matter is, I think we're all, what I've cared about, I learned in the Marine Corps, is if a man that could die in the same ditch with you ought to could go in the same bathroom with you. And so I tried to run my company that way. We really cared about who could get the ball in the basket, not who their parents were or where they went to school, unless it was Duke. And then, no, I'm kidding, of course, a little bit of kidding. But anyway, I think that's what one of the things that's made Charlotte great. To answer the question about did I ever think about 115 people a day moving here, not really. But what I really did, I think we've achieved, and I did believe we could achieve, which was to bring brain power to this city. And that's what's really made us do well. And the brain power comes in all kind of different packages, and we don't really care what the package looks like. It's, as long as they bring the energy and the brains and the hard work with them, then that's what we're interested in. And that, I think we should feel good about that, because people are coming to this city because they think there's opportunity here and it's a great place to live. And some years ago, I made a speech about when I first came here. I thought it was a boring place, and it really was. And you couldn't buy a drink, you couldn't dance to live music, and it was fairly. I thought it was more liberal in the Baptist church than it was in Charlotte. But anyway, we've changed all that. But and so I made the speech about. I asked somebody at that time. That was about 1960. Why does anybody want to live here? And it says it's a great place to raise a family. And so I'm many years later, I'm making a speech, and I said it's a great place to raise a family, but not for everybody. So we still have the problem that we have a large part of our city that got left behind. And so all the new people that are coming are well educated and getting good jobs, but we haven't really been able to reach a large part of our population and help get them jobs. So what I've been doing with most of the rest of my life is trying to figure out how to help people move up the economic ladder by training for a job or getting educated, one or the other. And I think that's really our challenge is if we want a challenge, our next challenge is not building something, but it's helping lift a whole group of people that we've left behind. And we didn't leave them behind on purpose, but we did leave them behind because we weren't focusing. And so we got to focus on that a little bit. That's my sermon for the day.
Got a question right here.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is a particular treat for me because I've been a fan for a while. And I think about when you came here, Mr. Gantt, I mean, that was Selma. That was the year Selma happened, you know, so there was a lot of changes in the air. And I'm in the AEC industry and then a background in commercial lending. So this is like a master's class in planning. But what I'd like to do, and as a recovering politician, what would be your advice to those serving now and the young guns coming up to make that vision and become design and executable?
I think you, first of all, really, if you want to go into public service, you really have to care. It should not be, I do see too many people who like I can't think of a great word.
Limelight.
They like the limelight. I'll use that. They like being on television. They like saying that they have so much power to do X, Y, and Z and do nothing. But I think you have to be sincere about caring about people. That sounds cliche-ish, but it is. You really do have to care about your community and then try to find the levers, things that you need to do to help make it happen. That's about as simple as I can put it. I started off in this town being on the plumbing advisory board because I was an architect and somebody thought, well, he's an architect, he might understand plumbing. But I cared. I thought I cared about, and I took the job so seriously. I mean, I came there and got interested in that, and one thing led to another. But my point is, I don't see a lot of sincerity today. I see too many people who want to say the solutions to our public problems. And I saw this in the last campaign. It's just easy. Find something to attach yourself to, or get in the business of othering other people that are dangerous to your way of life, or building fear and anxiety in a community. That's not what a leader, I think, ought to be doing. And I saw a lot of that a couple of weeks ago in this campaign, such that the people who won sometimes are ashamed to say that their guy or their person won. The people who should be proud of what they're doing, they're asking themselves the question, what are we becoming? You win because you're pulling people apart. But if you're sincerely interested in public service, it seems to me you have to want to see the quality of life improve. To see Hugh McColl 2.0 working very hard to give people a better shot at the promise of America.
Hugh, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, of course, he and I see things very close together. So I don't know if I can improve on that, but I think we do need to drive ourselves forward and focus on people that we know and can help that are right in front of us. And I really think, most people have good hearts and have good intentions. I think we're very poorly informed about some of the issues, and because we don't let ourselves see them. And I think we need to work on that a little more and think positively about what we can do to change things and build at the same time. In other words, if we plan to continue to grow at 117 people a day, we're going to have to, we're running out of dirt, and we're going to have to go up, and we know that. So then we need good planning and good thinking about what this city is going to be like. And we need to, as we do that, we got to remember our nurses, our teachers, our people working in our offices and who work for us and who serve us have to be able to afford to live here. So we've got to get out of the idea that affordable housing is some sort of charity. It's not. We need a place for everybody to live in our city. And so that's a real problem. And if we don't fix it, we're going to find ourselves unable to function. So we need to work on that too. We all know that, but we need to remind ourselves. Anyway, I think I'm very bullish on the city. And part of it is I don't try to go everywhere. If I did, I'd fuss about the traffic more. I spend most of my time dodging people running red lights.
Okay, let's not go there because I mean I know you probably want to talk to the city manager about that. But last thing for you all to leave with this group of leaders who, I can say I think people would aspire to have the impact either of you have had. And so, what parting words and advice would you leave people as they continue to take the vision and this great city forward? Hugh, let's start with you.
Well, I think that the business community always has the responsibility of trying to make this a better place to live and work. And I think the CEO Leadership Council is a good way to do that. Is it give people a chance to come together, look at the various opportunities and challenges to the city, and put them in order of how to deal with them and to deal with them. So I think we have the machinery in place to do that. I think also, though, if we're going to continue to try to be successful and continue to make this city healthy, then the Alliance has got to bring more big businesses here, more jobs here, and we need to be working on that all the time. And I think we've been complacent about that to a large degree. We've made tremendous amount of money in the finance business in this city, that is in private equity and into money management. And we have, I think, roughly 20,000 millionaires in this city. It may surprise me. We have roughly 600 black millionaires in this city, which is interesting. This is a very rich city, but we've left too many people out of the game. And if we bring in new people here, we're going to have new businesses here. And so we need to work on that. But I think the men and women that run the business in this city should continue to get together and pool their thinking about what do we need to do. You don't need to hear from somebody that's nearly 90 years old. I think I'm nearly 90. You forget these details.
Yeah, you are.
That happens to you when you get older. Anyhow, I got nothing else to say.
I don't think it's a mystery that I love this city. I told that little story at the beginning, but it just simply shows how the reason I love the city is because of the people in the city, and starting with the Howard Johnson desk clerk. And I have seen this city do very good things. I have seen this business community that Hugh talks about engaging with the community and trying to be a leader. And I worry, but I'm hopeful that that legacy built by the older business community is being carried on and is carried on today. Some of the young people, younger leaders that I have met and gotten to know. So I'm bullish on Charlotte. And I want Charlotte to do more to lead North Carolina. I want Charlotte to do more to lead North Carolina. I do worry about what happens in the rural areas of our state, and a state government that took years to implement Medicaid that would have helped so many people, particularly in rural areas. I want the state to capture the spirit that I've seen in this community that has made it better. I want you, as the younger leaders, he's 90, I'm 80 plus, to really move it forward. And I see our mayor sitting here and our manager, and I'm proud of them, proud of what they're doing. We ought to become more engaged with how other North Carolinians feel and show them the progress we're making. And then to try to find ways with our state legislators from this area to, in fact, enhance and improve quality of life in other sections of the state. Because I've driven to every county in this state, and sometimes it's like night and day, and a lot of us don't realize it. It's like night and day. We have a responsibility, in my opinion, to do more, to keep lifting this place upward and making the promise of America more real.
Well, there's the challenge. And I think on behalf of everyone here, thank you both for being here. And let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Gantt.